Something is on the move in Germany. Heavyweight machines on wheels. In Bavaria, gigantic mobile cranes are lifting whole bridges amidst the traffic on the freeway.
We have to make sure we don't get run over.
In North Rhine-Westphalia, a heavy haul vehicle makes its way along tight roads. A race against time.
My colleagues have to clear up everything I've torn down.
And a crane boom at its limits. The steel bends under the 10-ton load.
When the boom bends like this, it's a very tense situation.
A huge strip mine. Heavy equipment like this massive machine is in operation. A surface miner chews through the subsoil to extract ore, coal, or limestone in the Ruhr region. These gigantic mining machines are manufactured by Wirtgen in Windhagen near Bonn. 2 p.m., a brand new surface miner leaves the factory destined for a coal mine in Texas. It weighs 142 tons, is 4 meters high and 17 meters long. This colossus has to reach Bonn's port today. From there, it's heading to the USA. The employees of Victor Baumann's heavy transport company have no time to lose. They have to load the surface miner and transport it to the port located 30 kilometers away at a snail's pace. A journey full of obstacles and tight spots that will take around 5 hours. The heavy haul vehicle is only allowed to move at night. Stefan Oerter is in charge of loading. He has to watch the schedule and make sure that the surface miner, with a price tag of several million euros, isn't damaged during loading.
Roughly this position here where the M is. At the M.
Yeah, roughly where the M is.
Okay, then move back a little. Right, okay, stop.
The miner is in its loading position and can now be lifted using 2 cranes.
If the load isn't lifted evenly, the weight between the 2 cranes can shift. In the worst case, one of the cranes would be overloaded.
The workers attach huge steel cables to the miner's 4 lifting eyes. The miner's tracks are then prepared for transport.
The track guard shoes have to be removed so we can establish a non-slip connection between the steel plate, which is the connection to the trailer, and the track unit using these rubber mats. And then we have the track unit with the rubber mat in between, and then the steel plate as a positive connection. To make sure it's done properly, we have to remove the track guards.
Would it slip if they weren't removed?
Yes, it could slip then.
The 2 crane drivers now have to lift the giant machine in tandem and position it on a low-bed trailer. Their finesse and experience are crucial.
I've been doing this for 25 years now. Things like this have more or less become routine. They shouldn't really become routine, but the ground conditions here are very good. It's not a field or a forest or anything like that. And the cables and shackles are oversized. Normally, nothing should go wrong.
When lifting, it's important that both cranes lift the load synchronously, that the machine remains horizontal and is then evenly lifted to a height of around 1.5 meters so we can move the platform trailer beneath it. If the load isn't lifted evenly, the weight between the 2 cranes can shift. In the worst case, one of the cranes could be overloaded.
The all-important point of loading, lifting.
Take up the load slowly. Okay, Franz, carry on, lift.
The 2 cranes have to work absolutely synchronously so that the surface miner doesn't start to swing. In the worst case, it could become uncontrollable and hit the cranes.
Okay, Franz, stop. Uwe, you take up the load slowly too. Yes, carry on. And now both cranes lift slowly. A bit faster, Uwe.
We really have to lift evenly. If he lifts too fast, I have too much weight. Or if I lift too fast, he has more weight. So when you're lifting in tandem, things have to be balanced. And because we can't really see whether we're straight from up here, our colleague is out there watching that we stay straight.
Can you lift a bit slower, Uwe?
Done. The surface miner is suspended exactly 1.5 meters above the ground. Now, the next giant comes into play. A low-bed trailer with 16 axles and 128 wheels. Now the men face their next challenge. The miner has to be positioned precisely in the center of the special trailer, so the load is evenly distributed. Otherwise, the trailer could start to sway and possibly tip over. That would be a major disaster. Absolute precision is now required.
Can you slew to the right a bit? And Uwe, release your slewing brake.
The miner isn't aligned precisely yet.
Good, good. Good. Measure again now.
Now the distance on both sides is right. Job done, at least for the crane drivers. The workers lower the miner's hydraulic travel drive. The heavy load has to be as low as possible to pass beneath traffic lights and bridges on its way to the port. Then it's fastened down.
By moving forwards, we've established a positive connection between the track and the vehicle. We'll now use this positive locking beam that we've attached to the vehicle to establish a positive connection between the actual load, the miner, and our trailer. That helps to secure the load. This positive connection is also used to calculate the overall force of the chains needed to secure the load. To put it differently, the beam helps us to secure the load as well as possible with the least possible tensioning material. If we didn't have it, we would have to attach far more chains to the vehicle to stop the machine from slipping forwards when the vehicle brakes. You can see here that the beam is fastened to the vehicle itself with massive studs and bolts.
The 16-axle low-loader suspension can also be lowered hydraulically, more important centimeters for the challenging journey to the port.
We've now set the platform roller to the driving level. We'll be using a ride height of 1.1 meters. And that guarantees that we stick to the driving height required in the permit.
And that's a maximum of 5.1 meters. If the heavy haul vehicle were higher, even more traffic lights and street lamps would have to be removed on the route to the port. The trailer's hydraulic unit will continue running because problems may also be encountered along the way.
If necessary, the left-right load can also be balanced out using the vehicle's hydraulic system if the carriageway is slanted, so that the load is always in the center of gravity and to prevent the semi-trailer from tilting to the right or left.
Even if the trailer always remains horizontal, the load must not move a millimeter. The miner is additionally fixed in place with heavy tensioning chains. The loading work takes 4 hours, and then the giant machine is ready for its 30-kilometer journey to Bonn's port. So far, the men are still well on schedule, but the most difficult part is still to come. Change of location. Unterschleißheim near Munich. This 60-ton mobile crane is Andy Schmitz's workplace. His boss, Sven Bauer, is explaining what he'll be doing today.
Right, Andy, we'll just take another look at what we're doing tonight.
Yep.
So everything's okay, we'll start here first and head towards Munich.
Okay.
So you'll drive to Holzkirchen, turn around and head back, and stop ahead of the bridge. Once the lanes are blocked, 1 and 2, you can start ballasting. Tonight we have to remove the temporary bridge that we put in place at the start of the year for Janssen Bridging in Sauerlach. That's 3 bridges per section carriageway direction, each weighing around 45 metric tons. We'll do it all tonight with the 200-tonner. We need that because of its high carrying capacity.
Meaning that this Hercules on wheels can lift 200 tons. Even experienced crane driver Andy is in awe of this giant.
There's a bit of tension. You have to pay a bit more attention than if you're lifting pallets of bricks.
The lack of time is also the problem for the men in Munich. The A8 freeway near Munich is being blocked off and the traffic diverted specifically for this work. Everything has to be completed by 6 a.m. so that the rush hour traffic can flow. And speed isn't exactly one of the giant crane's strengths.
It's an automatic vehicle. It takes a while before you reach 80 kilometers per hour and the 60 metric tons are in motion. And I have to say that a lot of car drivers underestimate this vehicle's speed and volume. You always have people pulling in front of you and then braking, or driving too slowly, or cutting in.
The construction site. The old temporary bridge is still in place in front of a new freeway bridge. It now has to be removed as quickly as possible and heaved onto low loaders. Each of the 3 sections weigh 45 tons.
It's important to take a look at the site first. What's the layout? What do I have to do? What do I have to watch out for? What do I need for support? Then I level the crane until it's straight, and then we can start ballasting.
To do this, heavyweight steel plates first have to be unloaded. The crane will rest on these, because otherwise the outriggers would break through the asphalt under the enormous load.
That's our foundation where the crane will finally stand, where it gets its stability and carrying capacity. If that's not right, it doesn't matter how powerful the crane is.
2 of the freeway's lanes are still open, working while the traffic rushes past.
We have to make sure we don't get run over, or that we don't walk into the area where the vehicles are moving. Like I say, we've done this before. At some point, you get used to things shooting past you.
Now the crane also has to be set up quickly. The work is supposed to be completed in a few hours. The mobile crane is loaded with a total of 74 tons of weights so that it doesn't fall over when it's carrying the bridge sections.
The tension is extreme, particularly because we're often dealing with hundreds of thousands or millions of euros, not peanuts. You really have to pay attention and make sure that you work professionally, otherwise your costs explode.
It takes a whole hour before the crane is ready. If the men make even the tiniest mistake here, it could end in a catastrophe.
Despite all of these safety regulations and all the new technology, cranes still fall over on a regular basis due to some kind of operator error or minor details. Things where you think it's just routine and don't really pay attention, and wham! In a matter of seconds, disaster.
Things are getting serious now for crane driver Andy Schmitz. The low loaders are already waiting for the bridge sections. On the bridge, workers attach them to the crane. In a moment, the mobile crane will lift the first 30-meter-long section.
I'm more or less working blind because I can't check both sides anyway. I have to rely on my instructions on the radio, and the tension is slowly starting to build because you never know what's going to happen.
The further the crane's boom is extended, the less it can lift. So the crane driver always has to remember what weight is manageable at a certain boom length.
On the monitor, I can see what maximum weight I could lift at this crane working radius. Then I have a display that shows the weight on the hook, the tackle, and what my working radius is. What the mast length is.
Over 40 tons are now dangling from the mobile crane. That's the equivalent of 40 small cars. One wrong grip, one hasty movement, and the load can start to swing dangerously.
It's important to do everything slowly, particularly with this weight. You have to make sure the working radius is right. If it isn't, the weight can either shoot forwards when it's released or towards the crane. And when 40 tons start to move, it's very difficult to bring them to a standstill again.
Despite the time pressure, Andi Schmitz has to remain calm, because loading the bridge section onto the low loader is also precision work. Later that night, the vehicles will be returning to their base in the Netherlands, where the bridge sections will be prepared for their next mission. Working on a construction site. A man's dream come true?
Yeah, it's really a big man toy. It's clear, if you've maybe had a dream and you can make that dream come true so that you're in the middle of the action rather than just watching it, it's pretty cool. It certainly gets your adrenaline going.
It takes a total of 3 hours before the first 2 bridge sections are loaded. All that's missing now is the final element of the temporary bridge before the freeway can be opened up again punctually. Nothing can go wrong now because the rush hour traffic is starting to build up. 30 meters of steel bridge weighing 42 tons are lifted into the night sky and start to swing. A problem because the new bridge could be damaged.
The weight is moving outwards simply because the working radius is too big. Then you just pull it slowly and gently. You try to move and draw it in. And then you have it under control again.
Crane operator Andi Schmitz stays cool and gently sets the giant bridge down onto the low loader. Done. This side of the temporary bridge has been removed safely. The other side of the freeway is scheduled for another night. Andi Schmitz and his team now have to strip everything down again. They spend another hour loading the ballast and the foundations under the outriggers onto the trucks.
Everything went very smoothly and quickly, no injuries. Now we're finished for today and we'll be back tomorrow.
The mobile crane team has kept to the schedule, and the traffic on the freeway can start moving again a few hours earlier than planned. Back in Windhagen, near Bonn, this gigantic heavy haul vehicle, carrying a 142-ton construction machine, is scheduled to reach the port of Bonn tonight. The Colossus can only cover the 30 kilometers at night to prevent chaos on the roads. First, the police have to approve the transport. Chief Commissioner Frank Poveleit checks that everything is secured properly.
So, 24 axles. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 24. That's great. Now I need the light switched on.
And the hydraulic unit is started so that Frank Poveleit can also check that all lines are sealed properly. The Chief Commissioner from Bonn's Traffic Police will also be accompanying the transporter on its journey. He checks each detail with the eyes of a hawk. Everything appears okay at first. But then he discovers something that raises cause for concern.
There's a spot under there. I don't know what kind of fluid that is. Not that we get on the road and then discover that a hydraulic line is leaking and we can't continue the journey. Because then the thing's stuck on the road. That doesn't need to happen. If we discover it here, then we can take a look.
A hydraulic leak? An oil leak? Can the heavy haul vehicle start at all? The mechanics immediately start to look for the cause, because the schedule is now in jeopardy. Then some good news.
It was just water.
A sigh of relief. But a few meters further on, the police officer finds something else.
Mattis! Need a flashlight? What's that then? Do we know? Is it oil or what?
Yep.
So it is oil. Panic sets in when Transport Manager Bernd Segbers arrives to determine the extent of the damage.
A line is leaking. The chassis are bolted together, then the hydraulic lines are connected. We've got a leaky line.
Haste is required because exchanging a complete line takes a while. The transport schedule would be ruined. Fortunately, though, all that's needed is the spirited use of a wrench.
Right, that's that. A connector between the hydraulics and nut was a bit loose. We've tightened it so the connection's now leak tight. No more oil is leaking. So we managed to fix the small leak quickly. When a trailer like this is assembled, it's got hundreds of connectors, and it can happen that movement causes a nut to come loose. Then it's no longer 100% leak tight, and a bit of oil drips out. But no more oil is leaking now because we've retightened this nut.
I'll keep looking. I hope we don't find anything else.
Luckily, everything else is okay. The transport to the port of Bonn can start punctually. The convoy sets off at 11 p.m. The tractor unit initially tows the trailer on its own. Later on, it will be joined by a second truck, which will push the trailer when it gets steeper. The first hurdle, the factory gate. It's extremely tight here, and the road is wet too. Despite all-wheel drive, the 600 horsepower tractor unit's front wheels spin briefly. The heavy haul vehicle just fits through between the gatehouse and the barrier. Then the convoy finally makes it onto the road. Ahead of it lie around 30 kilometers of small communities, winding country roads, and Bonn city center.
You need to move to the right a little. Good. Stay as you are. Just a touch to the left.
The trailer was manually steered out of the factory and onto the road, and so the trailer runs straight again behind the tractor unit. It needs to be tracked. Those commands were for the driver to give manual steering instructions to the trailer again so that it runs in a straight line behind the tractor unit. The commands were from the driver traveling behind the trailer because he can see exactly how the trailer is running behind the tractor unit, pulling at the front.
The truck driver behind the heavy haul vehicle acts as a guide. He watches one side to make sure everything is okay. Bernd Segbers watches the other side.
Looks good on the right. Just watch your height. Everything else is okay. Carry on, the height's fine. You're through. No problem.
Ralf Schulze is the advance party. He clears every obstacle out of the path of the heavy haul vehicle. He's pretty familiar with the route, but a new obstacle has cropped up in one place.
This rotary is new. Before it was just a normal T-junction. Super wide, you could easily drive through it. And now we'll have to see. We'll certainly manage it, but I'll stay here a while in case an additional sign needs moving, so I can get the job done quickly. We'll just have to see. What's not so good is the hard edges on the curbs. That's not so great for the tires, of course. We might have to watch out a bit that nothing is damaged.
The convoy reaches the roundabout. As it drives over the curbs, the trailer remains level. Thanks to its swing axles, the wheels can move up or down independently of one another, enabling the Colossus to overcome the obstacle without any problems.
If you drove over it with rigid axles, your vehicle would tilt to the right or left. Because of the vehicle technology, this trailer always remains level and maintains its height.
After a few kilometers, the heavy haul vehicle winds its way through the Siebengebirge hills, up and downhill along the narrow country roads.
Normally, there are no trucks at this altitude. That's why there are a few leaves flying around.
Suddenly, the convoy stops. The reason being that the rear truck now has to be coupled so that the heavy haul vehicle makes faster progress, because the gradient is becoming increasingly extreme. The second truck is attached after just 1 minute. Everything is still on schedule, and the convoy proceeds with twice the power.
Because of the gradient, yeah, so we're a bit faster. I could do it alone, but it's a bit of a struggle.
Mathis Kirschner has been working for the heavy haul company for over 20 years. He's never been bored with his job.
Routine? No, I wouldn't say that. There's always a new challenge, always a new cargo, a different weight.
Bridge over the A3, you've got to go at a walking pace again.
Because there's a high risk of damage when crossing a bridge.
You can't drive too fast because of the weight. Almost all bridges are already damaged anyway. We don't need to break the remaining ones, do we?
A right-hand corner in the next built-up area is particularly tight. There are houses on the left and posts setting concrete on the right. Just after the corner is a crosswalk with lighting, an unexpected obstacle.
Okay, on the right. Oh, slowly, slowly, slowly. They're all moving on the left side. Hang on, there's a cable or something. There's a cable dangling there. You need to push it up. Mr. Schultz? Yes, I heard. I'm coming back.
We've got an aerial cable between the two lamps that light up the crosswalk. And the cable is sagging. It's too low for our vehicle height. So the advance party is coming back now with lifting rods to push the cable up so that we can drive underneath it.
Ralf Schulze from the advance party takes a lifting rod from the truck. He has to hurry so that the sagging cable doesn't delay the heavy haul vehicle too long. The convoy is around 30 centimeters too high for the cable.
Drive on slowly. Okay, you're through.
Despite all caution, the heavy-duty transporter has bent a sign badly. Not even Ralf Schulze manages to straighten it again. That's a job for the reconstruction team following behind the heavy haul vehicle. That setback cost the convoy 10 minutes. Now, no more major mishaps can happen if the men are to keep to their schedule.
We've always driven on the right there.
Correct. The height's normally okay, too.
Bernhard Gratz is driving the rear truck. He has to stick precisely to his colleague's speed and steering maneuvers.
We've known one another long enough, and we've done this often enough. So you know what you have to do. I've been doing this for 35 years. And Mathis at the front, he's been doing it for 25 years. Here's another refuge now. A bit longer, with a traffic light in it. He's turned the traffic light around here because of the height. Through. Driving off again each time takes too long when he's alone, of course. It's much faster when there are two of you. I help with braking a bit when we're going downhill with the retarder. That's sort of a hydraulic brake. But at the moment, I'm not doing anything. I'm just being towed along.
Things are even tighter in the next town. The convoy should actually turn right here, but there's no chance with a total length of 45 meters. The transport professionals use a trick.
The trailer's turned off to the left here. We have to go in that direction because the bend's too tight to turn right, so we turn to the left first. And now we have to switch trucks. The pushing truck will now become the tractor unit, and the tractor unit will become the pushing truck. So we just switch them around. Okay, done.
Even after this obstacle, there are a lot of difficulties along the route.
I'm going to call the SWB, the tramway dispatchers. They have to make sure that there are no trams running when we cross the Rhine on the freeway. That means the dispatcher has to... Hello, Zigbers from Baumann. Good evening, Mr. Jacobs. Just to let you know, we're on our way now. We'll have reached the freeway bridge in around 20 minutes. Okay, that's great. Thanks. Bye. So, they know now, and if a tram comes, they'll make it wait until our heavy haul vehicle has crossed the freeway bridge over the Rhine.
But first, the convoy has to pass under the freeway. Because it's too high, the men lower the trailer's suspension by 15 centimeters.
We've hydraulically lowered the height of the trailer, because with the ride height we had before, the transporter wouldn't have fitted beneath the bridge. By lowering it, we now have the right passage height, so we can fit beneath the bridge's beam here. And once we're through, we'll raise the trailer 15 centimeters again, so we have sufficient ground clearance.
Now the load is only around 5 meters high and just fits beneath the bridge. Now the heavy haul vehicle could theoretically drive on the freeway towards Bonn. But another problem has cropped up. Police officer Frank Poveleit receives more bad news over his radio.
We're having difficulties on Römerstraße. It's completely blocked with parked cars, although no parking zones had been set up. But my colleagues are there and are attempting to sort things out.
500 kilometers further south, crane driver Andy Schmitz is arriving at the next construction site with his 60-ton mobile crane. Here in Augsburg, he's supposed to help dismantle this 50-meter-high construction crane. But it's in the middle of a new housing development.
The difficulty is, firstly, the fact that it's pretty tight. For the people to hold it, of course, and for me to lift it out, or to get in between the houses and then take it apart, because then we've got a boom length of around 60 meters.
First, he has to position the crane by placing its outriggers on the concrete foundations and loading his weights. But the first problem soon rears its head.
The problem is that the counterweight here can't get past the scaffolding, because it would now be about here. This is the slewing range, and it'll press against that, and we can't get past. That's the problem right now, so I have to take off the two counterweights at the side. And I hope that'll be enough.
So the outer weights are taken off again. That uses valuable time because the crane's next job is only a few hours away. But even without the outer weights, the crane still can't get past the scaffolding.
Damn. Now we've got to reconfigure the crane. There's no other way. And that'll cost us even more time. Customers annoyed, crane drivers annoyed. Not good at all.
First, Andy Schmitz has to strip everything down again.
I've got to move the entire crane about 1 meter over there.
The crane driver is irritated because repositioning a 15-meter-long mobile crane takes valuable time.
Great, bogged down at the back too.
Andy Schmitz is under pressure because the crane disassembly team is only waiting on him and is getting impatient. If his crane still catches on the scaffolding, the disassembly schedule will be jeopardized. But it finally fits.
That's now taken me at least 3/4 of an hour to an hour. Happy's the wrong word. I'm satisfied now. Let's see how things proceed.
He can't really make up the lost time because absolute concentration and precision are needed in such cramped conditions. Rushing can quickly lead to accidents and cause extensive damage. But then the next problem crops up.
The problem is that the bolts become canted, rusty or seized over time, and that's why it can take a little longer.
After a few minutes, the first crane element is suspended from the boom, which bends ominously.
The first time when the boom bends like this with the load is a bit tense if you're not used to it. Particularly when the boom is extended to a length like this, it can tilt by 1.5 to 2 meters. And you have to cope with that.
This 40-meter-long crane element weighs around 10 tons, a gigantic load, especially when the mobile crane's boom is almost fully extended.
You don't feel like you're a big hero or anything like that. You're just concentrated. You don't think about much. You're more focused on moving stuff properly.
Now the unwieldy steel part only needs to be lowered, but another construction crane is in the way.
That's just typical that people don't watch out and aren't interested whether anything else is being moved because they're used to the fact that nobody is there. But now somebody is there and they're not paying attention.
But Andy Schmitz manages to get the 40-meter crane parts skillfully past this obstacle as well.
That was tricky, but as you can see, we've got it down and everything is in one piece. So we managed the job pretty well.
But the nerve-wracking work is far from done. He has to heave more than 15 other crane parts past the houses and set them down on the waiting trucks.
I'm taking the first load to the next construction site where the crane will be set up on Monday. So the whole loading process is actually just starting to kick off now.
The schedule is so tight because the crane is already needed at the next construction site. Andy Schmitz has the next big part weighing 14 tons on his hook.
The top part is heavier than expected, a bit too heavy. It's right at the limit. If it weighed another 100 kilos, it would be over. Then the crane wouldn't be able to lift it.
And would simply shut off. Then he would only be able to lower the load vertically but no longer turn the crane. The construction crane's tower elements are next. They're also set down on one of the 9 low loaders. Andy Schmitz has his crane perfectly under control, but not even he can get past this tree in his approach path.
As soon as there's any pressure against the load, it moves and is uncontrollable. So somehow I have to get in between.
In this case, the tree has to yield and sacrifice a couple of branches. Andy Schmitz can only get the crane part onto the truck waiting below by taking precisely this route. The next obstacle. When the construction site was set up, the base of the construction crane was completely free. Now it's obstructed and located in a very narrow part of the parking garage.
Now the problem is that they've made the hole where the crane was stood so small that we can't lift the base out in one piece. That's why we now have to take it apart down there and then load it.
Unbolting the entire base takes more valuable time. After a whole day of hard work, the construction crane is disassembled and can be set up again at the next construction site. All in all, still on schedule.
It all went well. A bit of a delay at the beginning, but otherwise satisfactory. It's not just the crane that's relieved, you are too, because you've coped with everything pretty well again, without any injuries or damage.
Back to the 45-meter-long heavy haul vehicle that's having to overcome one obstacle after another on its way to the port of Bonn.
The particular thing in this case is that we have to cross the Rhine on the A562. That's a very big construction. Because it weighs over 260 metric tons, the heavy haul vehicle can only cross this bridge as a solo vehicle. That means the highway police have blocked off both traffic lanes and all entrances and exits for the heavy haul vehicle. And that's the special thing about this. The structural engineer has determined that we have to keep to a specific lane.
Ralf Schulze from the Advance Party marks this lane with traffic cones. This is precisely where the heavy haul vehicle will have to drive along in a moment.
We want the structure, the bridge, to last for a long time and want to handle it as gently as possible.
The colossus rolls onto the bridge at walking pace.
To minimize or prevent vibrations on the bridge, another condition is that the transporter's maximum speed mustn't exceed 5 kilometers an hour. And we're not allowed to brake or start off on the bridge to prevent shocks that would then act on the structure. Bernhard, you'll let me know when you've passed the flood bridge?
I'm exiting the bridge now.
Okay, we'll follow on slowly.
All right.
At a construction site in Bonn, Ralf Schulze has to make some space. The wide heavy haul vehicle wouldn't get past the red and white warning boards. Reinforcements have arrived because Ralf Schulze already has to deal with the next obstacle. A traffic light is in the way. Fortunately, it has a joint, so it can simply be folded down. Heavy loads often come along this route, which is why the practical joint has been fitted.
So that's that. The transporter can come now. Then we'll continue. And my colleagues at the rear have to clear up everything I've torn down. There's another tight construction site coming up right ahead.
A parking ban has been imposed here for days, but the police still have to tow a few vehicles beforehand. And the construction site is still too tight for the convoy. Solo operator Schulze once again has to clear the way. Shortly before 3 a.m., after traveling for 4 hours, the heavy haul vehicle finally arrives at the port on time.
It went very well. We're an hour earlier than we'd anticipated, so I'm very satisfied. Compliments to the team, well done.
But one final difficult task still awaits the transport professionals. The heavyweight construction machine has to be loaded into the hull of a barge that's already waiting in Bonn's Rhine port without being scratched. To load it, the men once again have to clear things out of the way, like the concrete blocks on the quay wall. This is exactly where the cranes that are due to lift the 142-ton surface miner into the barge will be positioning their outriggers. To protect the port crane's rails, the men position steel beams next to the tracks. These will be topped with steel plates on which the mobile cranes will rest. The two mobile cranes can only lift the miner's 142 tons onto the barge when they're loaded with enough counterweights at the rear.
We're just ballasting the 500-tonner with 75 metric tons of ballast. They're necessary for both the 400-tonner and the 500-tonner to reach the barge down here against the quay wall with a working radius of around 14 meters. The working radius and the load-bearing capacity determine the necessary amount of ballast. That's set in the crane's computer program. It's ballasted accordingly. Otherwise, the crane doesn't operate, it cuts off.
After 3 hours, the two cranes are set up and ready for their mammoth task. Tractor unit driver Mathis Kirschner now has to move the trailer with the surface miner into position.
The maneuver functions as follows. The low bed trailer will move parallel to the two cranes, just like yesterday. The load will be attached to both cranes. Then we lift the machine from the low bed trailer and slow it at right angles through between the cranes, so we can then complete the movement parallel to the cranes again on the water side, so that the machine is lowered into the barge parallel to the quay wall. In principle, we move the machine through between the mobile cranes in an S shape. The difficult thing is that we have to make sure that the load doesn't hit the cranes at any point. You have to keep an eye on the distances between the machine and 500-tonner and the machine and 400-tonner, so the machine passes smoothly between the two cranes.
The biggest problem during this heavy work is gusts of wind. The cranes have to operate synchronously and with extreme precision. If the heavy load starts to move because of the wind, it could become uncontrollable. An enormous risk for everyone involved. The transport professional's tension rises. Slowly, the miner lifts off from the trailer. Stefan Oerter is a bit concerned about the black locking beam.
Could be that we push it forward a bit. No, it's coming. Okay, carry on slowly. Franz, up slowly. Okay, it's clear. Okay, both cranes lift up. So height's looking good. Dieter, you can swivel through first. I'll go down into the barge, okay?
The two crane drivers now turn the surface miner. Another tense situation that requires a lot of finesse and nerves of steel. If it's moved too quickly, the load could start to swing. Stefan Oerter climbs into the barge's hull to coordinate loading from below.
I'll go down to the cargo hold, okay, Captain? Precisely in the center, right? Yes, precisely in the center.
The crane drivers have to move the 17-meter-long and 5.5-meter-wide surface miner precisely between the two cranes. One of the most critical points of loading, because there are only a few meters of space on the left and right.
So far, everything's going well. The machine's coming. It's looking good. Slewing round went well.
And only 5 minutes, thanks to the lack of wind. The cranes now turn the miner parallel to the quay wall. It can only fit into the barge like this. Lowering it into the cargo hold is the last tricky part of loading the Colossus. Because the barge's hull is only around 1 meter wider than the miner itself.
Dieter, neck down a bit.
That means further away from the quay wall. The miner is carefully lowered into the cargo hold.
So I'm right at the front by the support with the front suspension. Is that okay?
The captain decides precisely where the load has to go, and he's satisfied. The Colossus is positioned perfectly.
Dieter, relieve the tension slowly. Franz, you can relieve the tension too. Okay, good?
Yep.
Right, we can unhook.
Okay.
The machine is stood precisely in the center of the barge. We've a good half a meter on the left and right, so no complaints.
The inland freighter immediately sets off for Bremerhaven. There, the miner will be transferred to a container vessel and shipped to the USA. All that remains for the transport professionals is to clear up, pack everything away, and head out to their next heavyweight mission.